Have you ever felt like just another face in the crowd, endlessly scrolling through job boards, sending out applications, yet never truly standing out? What if I told you that your next big career breakthrough isn't locked behind another certificate or a cheap online course? The real game changer is creating something so compelling that recruiters and clients can't help but notice you. Well, my friend, welcome to another exciting video. Today, we're building a stunning modern AI web app that's not just visually impressive, but also packed with interactive elements and smooth animations. You'll design a beautiful hero section with dynamic shapes that react to your cursor movements, along with a sleek nav bar featuring an animated sign-in button that smoothly opens a sign-in page when clicked. On smaller screens, this button transforms into an interactive hamburger menu for a seamless mobile experience. Next, we'll craft an eye-catching features section where each curved rectangular card reveals a hidden background image on hover, adding a touch of interactivity. Moving on, we introduce a circular pattern showcase to highlight key features in an elegant, structured layout. Then, we'll implement a modern bento box layout, a design trend used by industry leaders like Apple to present features in a clean, engaging way. Below that, we'll build a must-have pricing section, followed by a stunning application roadmap featuring high-quality images and beautiful gradient effects. Finally, we'll wrap it all up with a simple yet effective footer where users can connect to social media. And of course, every element is fully responsive, ensuring a flawless experience on tablets and mobile devices. This tutorial isn't just about coding a great design. It's about learning best practices for responsive front-end development, pushing your creativity, and mastering the skills that set you apart. So if you find this valuable, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means the world and helps us create more awesome content like this. Now, without further ado, let's dive in and bring this project to life. Before we start coding, we need to gather some images for this project. You can find everything in the GitHub repository, and the link is provided in the description below. Once you're there, please consider giving the repository a star to support the project. Then click on the Code button and download the zip folder, which contains all the necessary files. After downloading the assets, extract the zip file and drag the folder into your preferred code editor. Now let's set up the project by creating 3 essential files: the HTML file, which will define the structure of our web page, the CSS file, which will handle all the styling and animations, and the JavaScript file, which will add interactivity and dynamic effects. Inside the HTML file, we'll begin by setting up a basic structure. First, update the title to match the project and open the file using Live Server so we can see real-time updates. Before adding any elements, we need to link our CSS file inside the head section, and then link our JavaScript file at the bottom of the body using a script element. Now let's start building the layout. Inside the body tag, create a div with the class name container. This div will serve as the main wrapper, holding all the elements of our project. Inside the container, we'll create a header element, which will serve as the navigation bar. Within the header, we need 3 key sections. First, we'll create a div with the class name headLeft. This section will hold the logo image and an h1 element with the text MC Brain. Next, below the headLeft section, we'll add a navigation menu by creating an unordered list. Inside this list, we'll add 4 list items, each containing an anchor tag. These links will be labeled as features, pricing, how to use, and roadmap, allowing users to navigate through the page easily. Below the navigation menu, we'll add another div with the class name headWrite. This section will contain an anchor tag with the text new account. Beneath it, we'll create another div with the class name buttonbox. This extra wrapper is essential because it will allow us to apply a smooth border gradient effect to the button later using CSS. Don't worry, this will be very simple to implement. At this point, we have all the elements needed for our header. Now it's time to move on to styling it with CSS. Now, let's move to the CSS file and start by resetting some default browser styles. The first thing we need to do is remove the default margin and padding that browsers apply. Next, let's define the background color using the given RGB values. For the font styling, we'll set the font family to monospace to give it a clean and modern look. We'll also adjust the default text color of the page to a light gray for a more subtle and professional appearance. Now, let's target the container class. We'll set its display to flex and adjust the flex direction to column. This will allow all elements to stack vertically by default. To ensure proper alignment, we'll center everything using justify content and align items, making sure all content sits perfectly in the middle of the page. Finally, we'll set its position to relative to allow absolute positioning for the header and other elements later. Moving on to the header, we'll set its position to absolute and anchor it to the top of the page. We'll make sure its top, left, and right values are all set to 0 so that it stretches across the entire width of the viewport. The display will be set to flex, and we'll align all items to the center while using space between to distribute content evenly. For spacing, we'll add 10 pixels of padding to the top and bottom, and 30 pixels of padding to the left and right. Now, let's style the left section of the header, which contains the logo and brand name. We'll set its display to flex and align its items to the center to keep everything in place. The logo image will have a height of 45 pixels and we'll add a right margin of 15 pixels to create some space between the logo and the brand name. The unordered list will have a display of flex, ensuring that all links sit in a row. We'll also set its width to 30% and use justify content with space between uh, to evenly distribute the menu items. Before moving on to other elements, let's add a subtle border to the bottom of the header to separate it visually from the rest of the page. We'll make it a thin 0.5 pixel solid border to keep it clean and minimal. The color will be set using the given RGBA values to ensure it blends well with the background. Finally, we'll set the z-index to 999 to make sure the header stays on top of all other elements, preventing any overlapping issues. Target the list items inside the unordered list and remove their default bullet points by setting the list style to none. Next, we'll style the anchor tags inside these list items. We'll remove the default underline by setting text decoration to none, change the text color to gray, and enhance the typography by setting the font weight to 900 and the font size to 15 pixels. To prepare for the hover effect, we'll add a smooth transition of 0.3 seconds. Instead of styling just the menu links, we'll apply the same effect to all anchor tags inside the header, including the New Account button. When a user hovers over these links, we'll change the text color to white and apply a soft text shadow to make it stand out beautifully. Now, let's focus on the right section of the header. We'll set its display to flex and align all items to the center. Next, we'll style the button box, which will be responsible for handling the border gradient effect around the button. We'll set its position to relative and adjust the width to 100% with a height of 40 pixels. To create proper spacing, we'll add a left margin of 25 pixels. For the background, we'll apply a smooth linear gradient that transitions between different colors from left to right. For a seamless linear gradient, make sure the first and last colors are the same. To enhance the effect, we'll add a border radius of 10 pixels and double the background size by setting it to 200%. This will allow us to create an animated gradient effect. Now we need to create an animation called gradient animation. This animation will run infinitely in a linear motion over 2.5 seconds, smoothly shifting the gradient background for a dynamic effect. To add a creative touch, we'll modify the shape of the button box using the CSS clip path property. This allows us to create unique geometric designs. To find the perfect shape, we can use an online tool. Simply search for clip path CSS on Google and open the Bennett Feely website. From there, we can explore different shapes, and once we find the one that fits our design, we can copy the provided CSS code and apply it to our button box. Next, let's style the button itself. We'll set its position to absolute and use the inset attribute to define the top, bottom, left, and right spacing at 3 pixels. However, there's a small issue. The button box's width needs to be adjusted. Instead of 100%, we'll set it to a fixed width of 100 pixels to ensure a proper fit. For the button's appearance, we'll remove its default border and set the background color to match the page's background. The text color will be light gray, and we'll apply the same border radius and clip path styling as the button box to maintain a consistent look. To indicate interactivity, we'll change the cursor to pointer. Now, let's add a hover effect. When a user hovers over the button, the text color will transition to a vibrant purple, creating a visually appealing effect. We'll also add a smooth transition of 0.3 seconds for a polished feel. Finally, let's run the border gradient animation using keyframes. For this effect, we'll set the initial background position to 200% to create a flowing movement across the gradient. Everything looks fantastic. The header is now fully styled with a clean navigation bar, a modern hover effect, and a beautifully animated call to action button. Now, it's time to move on to the exciting part, the hero section. Navigate to the HTML file and just below the header, create a new section with the class name hero. Inside this hero section, we'll add 3 key images that will enhance the design. The first image will create a subtle blur effect, giving our hero section a soft and modern appearance. The second image will be the hero icons, which will later animate using JavaScript to create an interactive parallax effect on mouse movement. Finally, we'll add the hero rings image to complete the background design. Before styling these images, we need to assign unique class names so we can target them individually in the CSS. The first image will have the class name hero blur image. The second will be hero icons image, and the third will be hero rings image. Now, let's move over to our CSS file to style the hero section. First, we'll target the hero class and set its position to relative. We'll use Flexbox for alignment, setting both justify content and align items to center, ensuring everything is perfectly positioned. The section will have a width of 90% and a height of 150 viewport heights to create a spacious, immersive effect. To prevent any elements from overflowing outside the section, we'll set overflow to hidden. Next, let's style the images inside the hero section. We'll start with the hero blur image by setting its position to absolute and adjusting its width to 100%. To place it slightly above the main content, we'll set its top position to -15%. Now for the hero rings image, we'll also set its position to absolute, adjust its height to 90%, and move it down by setting its top position to 90 pixels. To give it a subtle look, we'll reduce the opacity to 0.4 so it blends smoothly into the background. Finally, we'll style the hero icons-image. We'll set its width to 100%, position it absolutely, and adjust its top position to 8% to align it correctly within the section. Everything is looking great so far. Now that we have the images in place, it's time to move on to adding the remaining elements for our hero section. First, navigate to the HTML file, and inside the hero section, just below the images, create an H1 element with the text. Discover the endless possibilities of AI. Converse with MC Brain. Directly below the H1, add an H3 element with a short descriptive text that introduces the platform and its capabilities. Great. Now let's move on to styling these elements. Open the CSS file and start by targeting the H1 inside the hero class. Set its position to absolute and move it 10% from the top to align it properly. We'll change the font family to Cambria increase the font size to 50 pixels, and set a max width of 1000 pixels to ensure readability. The text will be center aligned for a balanced look, and we'll set the color to white, making it stand out against the background. Next, let's style the H3 element. Set its position to absolute, adjusting the top position to 22% for proper spacing below the heading. The font size will be 20 pixels, and we'll limit its max width to 700 pixels to keep the text compact and visually appealing. The font family will match the H1 for consistency, and we'll align the text to the center. Finally, we'll change the text color to gray, making it subtle yet readable. Now let's add a call to action button. Head back to the HTML file and just below the H3 element, create a button with the text Get Started. In the CSS file, target this button and set its to absolute, placing it at 30% from the top. We'll remove the border and set its background color to white, while the text color will be black for strong contrast. The button will have a border radius of 10 pixels, with a width of 140 pixels and a height of 50 pixels, ensuring it's large enough to be easily clickable. To improve usability, we'll set the cursor to pointer and make the font weight bold. Next, we'll give this button a unique clip path shape to make it more visually interesting. To achieve this, visit bennettfeely.com Explore different clip path options and choose one that fits our design. Once you find the right shape, copy the generated CSS code and apply it to our button. To enhance user interaction, let's add a smooth hover effect. We'll define a 0.3-second transition. And when the user hovers over the button, we'll reduce the opacity to 0.7 and change the text color to violet, making it look more dynamic. So far, our hero section is looking great. In the next step, we'll take it even further by adding our exciting robot image to bring the design to life. Navigate to the HTML file. Inside the hero section, just below the button, create a new div with the class name Hero Image Box. This div will serve as a container for our robot image. Inside this hero image box, create another div with the class name Robot Box. This box will enclose two elements, a header section and the robot image itself. To do that, first add a div with the class name Robot Header, which will act as the top header of this section. Then, insert an IMG element inside Robot Box and link it to the correct robot image file using the sarc attribute. Now that the structure is in place, let's style it in CSS. Start by targeting the Hero Image Box class. Set the margin top to 250 pixels to create enough spacing from the elements above. Make its position relative so that we can position child elements inside it easily. Set the width to 1000 pixels and the height to 550 pixels. To better visualize the layout while working, temporarily set Overflow Hidden. Then define the display as Flex and set both Align Items and Justify Content to Center to ensure that everything inside is perfectly aligned. Add a border radius of 50 pixels to give it soft, rounded corners. For the background, we'll use the same gradient animation we applied to the button box in the header. Simply copy the 3 CSS lines related to the animated gradient and paste them here inside Hero Image Box. Now the background animation is applied, but it's not yet fully visible due to the robot image covering it. To fix this, we need to style the robot box class. Set its width to 99% and its height to 98% to slightly shrink it within the container. Now remove the overflow hidden from Hero Image Box and instead apply it to Robot Box. This ensures that the robot image stays within the boundaries of its container. Set the position to relative and apply the same border radius of 50 pixels to keep the rounded corners consistent. Next, target the robot image itself. Set both width and height to 100%, ensuring it fully adapts to the size of Robot Box. To blend it smoothly with our animated gradient background, apply the Mix Blend Mode property and set it to Hard Light. This will create a futuristic overlay effect. To fine-tune the layout, slightly adjust the width of Robot Box to 98.5%, ensuring that the border effect looks balanced. Now let's create the top header section inside Robot Box. Target the robot header class and set its height to 30 pixels and its width to 100% so that it spans the full width of the box. For the background, use the following RGBA color value to give it a slight tint. Finally, apply a backdrop filter blur to create a subtle glass-morphic effect, making the section look sleek and modern. With this in place, our robot section is looking fantastic. Now let's add 2 more image elements to enhance our hero section. First, navigate to the HTML file. Inside the hero image box, just below the robot box, create a new div with the class name element1. Inside this div, add an IMG element and link it to the element1.png image file using the sarc attribute. Next, do the same for the second image. Create another div with the class name element2, and inside it, add an img element, this time linking it to the element2.png file. Now that the structure is set up, let's move on to styling these elements in CSS. Start by targeting the element1 class inside the hero image box. Set its position to absolute so that we can position it precisely. Adjust its top position to 25 cent and move it slightly outside the container by setting the right position to 9 of 15 cent. To create a nice blur effect, apply backdrop filter blur. Then set its width to 25 cent and finally add a border radius of 15 pixels to give it smooth, rounded edges. Next, target the image inside element 1. Set its width to 100%, ensuring that it fills the entire container. Apply a border radius of 15 pixels to match its parent div, and to enhance its appearance, add a box shadow effect. For element 2, we can apply almost the same styles as element 1, but with a few adjustments. Change its top position to 45% to place it lower in the layout, and instead of positioning it on the right, move it to the left by setting left to -15%. Now copy the image styles from element 1 and apply them to element 2. Just make sure to replace element 1 with element 2 in the selector. And that's it. These additional images add depth and style to our hero section. Next, we're going to create an amazing parallax moving effect for the hero icon's image using JavaScript. This effect makes the background image move slightly as you move your mouse, giving your website a smooth and modern feel. It's a super simple technique but adds a premium look to any website. First, open your HTML file and locate the hero icon's image element. Add an extra class to this element called Parallax and also include a data attribute, DataSpeed, with a value of 4. I'll explain the role of DataSpeed in a moment. Now, switch to your CSS file and target the Parallax class. Here, set a smooth transition for the transform property by defining it with a duration of 1 second and a linear easing. This will ensure that any movement is gradual and fluid. Moving on to the JavaScript part, open your app.js file. Add an event listener for the mouse move event on the document and have it run an arrow function that receives an event parameter. Inside this function, you'll calculate the mouse's position relative to the window. Start by defining a constant for the x position. Take event.clientX divide it by window.innerWidth and subtract 0.5 to center the value. Do the same for the y position using event.clientY divided window.innerHeight, again subtracting 0.5. These calculated x and y values will then be used to adjust the transform property of our parallax element, making it move in response to the mouse movement. Next, let's implement the parallax effect for our hero icon's image. First, we grab all elements with the parallax class using document.querySelectorAll. Although we currently have only one element with this class, you can easily apply this effect to multiple images or text elements just by adding the parallax class to them. We then iterate over each of these elements using the forEach method with an arrow function that takes an element as its parameter. Inside this function, we create a constant named speed that retrieves the element's data speed attribute via the getAttribute method. With this speed value in hand, we dynamically update the transform style of the element by adjusting its translate values based on the mouse move event. This allows the element to shift its position in response to the user's mouse movement, creating a smooth and engaging parallax effect. And that's it. With these steps, the parallax effect for our hero icon's image is fully implemented. Before we move on to the next part, which is creating the sign-in page, let's quickly swap the robot image. Inside the zip folder you downloaded from the GitHub repository, you'll find two robot images. I believe the alternative one fits our design even better, so let's use that instead. Now, for this project, we are going to implement a sign-in page that smoothly opens and closes with an animation. To begin, navigate to the HTML file and, inside the main container, just below the hero section, create a div with the class name signInPageBox. Inside this div, create another div with the class name signInBox, which will contain an h1 element displaying sign-in. Next, add 3 input fields to serve as placeholders for user credentials. Below these inputs, create a button labeled Sign In. Finally, add a paragraph P tag with the text Login. With this structure in place, let's move on to styling the sign-in page in CSS. First, target the signing page box class and set its position to absolute with a top margin of 30%, a width of 30%, and a height of 60 VH. Then, style the sign-in box by setting its width and height to 100%, positioning it as relative, and applying a flex display with a column direction. Center align both items and justify content. For the background color, use the same gradient as our body. Add a subtle box shadow, and give it a border radius of 20 pixels for a smooth, rounded look. Now, let's focus on the elements inside the sign-in box. Start with the H1, setting its font size to 40 pixels and making it bold. Next, target the input fields, adjusting their padding to 7.5 pixels for the top and bottom and 30 pixels for the left and right. Set the background color to light gray with a width of 60% and a height of 35 pixels. Remove the default border and outline and apply a clip path effect to refine its design. Once applied, add a border radius of 5 pixels and a bottom margin of 5% for better spacing. Now, let's style the sign-in button. Make sure it stands out by applying a modern, clickable design. To complete the styling of the sign-in page, target the paragraph inside the sign-in page class and set its display to flex, align items to center, justify content to center, and adjust its width to ensure proper spacing. Since the paragraph will serve as an additional clickable element, copy the button styles and apply them to the paragraph, but change the background color to gray for differentiation. Remove the unnecessary border styles to maintain a clean look. To make the sign-in page interactive, start by moving to the HTML file and adding a div element inside the sign-in page class below the paragraph. This div will contain the close icon. Search for boxycons.com on Google. Open the website and navigate to the Usage section from the top right of the page. Scroll down until you find Usage as a font and copy the provided code. Paste this code inside the head section of your HTML file. Now go back to the homepage of boxycons.com and search for the X icon. Click on it, select the font option, and copy the provided code. Paste this code inside the div element you created. Now that the close icon is in place, style it using CSS. Target the div inside the sign-in page, set its position to absolute, adjust the top and right to 3%, set the font size to 40 pixels, and change the cursor to pointer to indicate interactivity. Add a hover effect so that when the user hovers over the close icon, its opacity reduces to 0.7, and add a transition of 0.3s for a smooth effect. To improve the layout, change the position of the sign-in page box from absolute to fixed, ensuring it stays in place when the user scrolls. To create the smooth animation effect for opening and closing the sign-in page, first set its initial state in CSS so that it is hidden. Target the sign-in page box class and set its opacity to 0. Add a blur effect using the filter property. This ensures that the sign-in page is invisible when the website loads. Next, define an animation for opening the sign-in page. Create a CSS class called .openSignin and set an animation named OpenSigninAnimation that runs for 0.7s forwards. Inside the @keyframes for this animation, transition the filter blur to 0, set the opacity back to 1, Now, if you manually add the .openSignin class to the .signinPage box in the HTML and refresh the page, you will see the effect in action. To improve the animation effect, modify the CSS so that the sign-in page moves from the bottom to the top when it opens. Navigate to the CSS file and locate the .signinPage box class. Change its initial bottom position from 30% to -60%. Then, in the openSignin class, set the bottom back to 30%. This adjustment ensures that the sign-in page smoothly slides up from the bottom of the screen when opened, creating a better user experience. Now that the animation is improved, let's move on to the next step. Before working with JavaScript, let's assign unique IDs to the necessary elements in the HTML. First, give the close icon an ID of close icon using camel case. Next, assign an ID of sign-in button to the sign-in button. Finally, set the ID of the sign-in page to sign-in page. Now, open the app.js file and start by selecting these elements. Use document.getElementById to grab the sign-in button and store it in a constant variable named sign-in button. Then, grab the sign-in page and store it in a variable named sign-in page. Next, add an event listener to sign-in button. When the user clicks the button, this function will execute and add the open sign-in class to sign-in page using the classList.add method. If we click the button now, the sign-in page should appear smoothly. Now let's define an animation class for the closing icon and make it functional. When the user clicks on the close icon, the sign-in page should close with a smooth animation. To achieve this, start by navigating to the CSS file. Here we'll define a class called closeSignIn and create an animation named closeSignInAnimation. The animation should have a duration of 0.7 seconds and move forwards. We'll use keyframes to define the animation. Transitioning the sign-in page from its open state back to its initial position. Next, we need to add this class to the sign-in page when the user clicks the close icon. JavaScript will handle this process. So, navigate to the app.js file. First, grab the close icon from the HTML using document.getElementById and store it in a constant variable named closeIcon. Just like we did for the sign-in button, we'll add an event listener to the close icon. Every time the user clicks on it, a function will run that adds the close sign-in class to the sign-in page. At this point, we can successfully open and close the sign-in page. However, there's an issue. Right now, we can only perform this action once. To fix this, we need to ensure that before adding the open sign-in class, we first remove the close sign-in class. Similarly, before adding the close sign-in class, we must remove the open sign-in class. This way, the sign-in page can open and close infinitely without issues. Everything looks great. Now it's time to create the final elements for our project. Let's move to the HTML file. Inside the Hero section, just below the Hero Image Box class, add an H4 element with the text, helping people create beautiful content at MC Brain. Next, below this heading, create a div with the class name Companies List. This will contain a list of companies. Inside this div, create another div with the class name Company. Within this company div, add an image element and set its source to company1.png. Then add a peep tag that displays the company's name. Now we need 4 more company cards. To create them, simply copy and paste the first company div 4 times. After that, update each card with its specific image and name. At this point, we have 5 company cards in total. That's it. Now let's move on to styling them using CSS. Start by navigating to your CSS file and first target the H4 element inside the Hero section. Set its position to absolute, place it 12% from the bottom, and change its color to gray to blend nicely with the design. Next, style the companies list. Set its display to flex. Adjust the justify content property to space between. Position it absolute at 3% from the bottom, and give it a width of 100% to ensure it spans the full width of the section. Looks like I made a typo in the companies list in the HTML. Always be careful and double check your code. Now target the company class itself. Set its display to flex and align items to the center so that the images and text sit neatly in a row. Inside this class, style the image element. Lastly, for the paragraph inside the company div, set its font size to 30 pixels and make it bold using font weight. So far, we've built the hero section of our project, the same one I introduced in the last video on my channel. This section serves as the first impression of our website, setting the tone with its layout, typography, and animations. But we're just getting started. In this session, we're going to take things to the next level by adding even more exciting sections to our project. However, before we move forward, there are a few key improvements we need to make. Let's start with the header. Right now, it scrolls with the page, but we want it to remain visible at all times. To fix this, we'll set its position to fixed, ensuring it stays at the top of the screen no matter how far down the user scrolls. But instead of a rigid feel, we'll soften its appearance by adding a semi-transparent background using RGBA values. This will create a smooth, modern look that blends seamlessly with the rest of the page. To take it even further, we'll apply a blur effect using the backdrop filter property, giving it a sleek, glass-like aesthetic. Next, let's improve our sign-in button styling. Right now, its styles are nested inside the head right class, which makes it less reusable elsewhere. To fix that, we'll move its styles into a dedicated button box, making it a more flexible, reusable component that we can easily apply throughout our project. Now, let's make the hero section more impactful. We'll set its width to 95%, ensuring it adapts well to different screen sizes, and we'll increase its height to 2000 pixels for a more immersive experience. For the sign-in page box, we'll tweak its animation for a smoother effect. Instead of using opacity to control visibility, we'll use scale. Initially, the box will have a scale of 0, keeping it hidden without affecting the page layout. And don't forget to change the opacity to scale in the open and close animations for the sign-in page. Lastly, we'll adjust the company's list width to 95% for better alignment and spacing within the layout. And now that we've optimized these sections, we're ready for the next exciting phase, building the features section. Let's dive in. To get started, open your HTML file and scroll down to the section where we have the sign-in page box. Right below that, we're going to build a brand new section designed to showcase our website's features. This section will highlight the power and functionality of our AI, giving users a clear understanding of what it can do. First, let's create a new section and give it the class name features-section. Inside this section, we'll add an H1 heading that introduces the section with the text, "Chat smarter, not harder with MC Brain." To enhance the section's visual appeal, we'll include a div with the class features gradient, which will serve as a stylish background effect. Then, we'll create another div with the class features card box. This will act as a container for all our feature cards. Now let's build our first feature card. Inside the features card box, we'll add a new div with the class features card. This card will contain a title, a paragraph explaining the feature, and a call to action button inside a div with the class explore more. Within the explore more div, we'll insert an image element that visually represents the feature. Below the image, we'll add an anchor tag that serves as a clickable link containing the text, "Explore more." To make it more interactive, we'll include an icon right next to the text. For this, we'll visit boxicons.com, search for a link icon, copy the provided font-based icon code, and paste it inside the anchor tag. Below the Explore More div, we'll include another image element linked to the feature's background image. This will create a visually engaging effect when the user hovers over the card, adding depth and interactivity. Before adding more feature cards, we need to refine the styling to ensure everything looks polished and structured. So now let's switch over to our CSS file and start designing. First, target the feature section in your CSS and apply the necessary styles. Set its position to relative so we can easily position child elements later. Use display flex with flex direction set to column to stack elements vertically and align everything to the center for a clean, balanced structure. Next, set the width to 95%, keeping it consistent with our hero section. To add a subtle touch, apply a thin 0.5 pixel solid border using the provided RGBA color value. But remove the top border by setting its display to none. Before we move on, let's copy this border style and apply it to the hero section as well. This keeps the overall design consistent and well-structured. Next, let's add padding to the features section. Setting it to 10% ensures enough spacing for a well-balanced layout. Now, move on to the image inside the Explore More class. Set its width to 70 pixels, so it remains visible but not overpowering. Then adjust the H1 element inside the features section. To make it stand out, set the font size to 50 pixels and limit its width a max width of 600 pixels. Center the text with text-align center, set the color to white, and add margin of 100 pixels for the top and bottom, while keeping the left and right margins at 0 sto to maintain its positioning. Now let's style the features card box. Before doing so, go to your HTML file and comment out the large image inside this section. This makes it easier to see the changes we're applying. After that, target the features card box class in CSS and set its width to 90%. Apply display, flex to align the cards horizontally, then set flex wrap to wrap for the card box. We actually don't need to set it for the features section class, so let's go ahead and remove that extra code. And set justify content to center to keep everything properly aligned. Add a gap of 30 pixels to space out the cards evenly. Now let's focus on the features card itself. First, set its position to relative to allow precise positioning of child elements. Next, set the width to 27 cent, but also ensure it remains readable on smaller screens by adding a minimum width of 400 pixels. On my screen, I'm setting it to 600 pixels, but for most users, 400 pixels will work best. Since I'm recording on a big screen, some elements might appear too large on desktop, kind of my fault, but no worries, you can easily adjust the size of any element as you go. So let's keep going. Then set the height to 600 pixels to keep the layout balanced. Apply a background color using the provided RGB value, and add a border radius of 20 pixels for a softer, modern look. To further enhance the design, let's apply a clip path to give our cards a more dynamic shape. Visit bennettfeely.com, explore different clip path options, and select one that fits the style of our website. Once you find a suitable shape, copy the provided code and paste it into the CSS for the features card. That's looking great. With the core structure in place, we can now move on to styling the individual elements inside each card. The first element to style is the H2 inside the features card. Since we want precise control over its placement, we'll set its position to absolute. Then, we'll position it 5% from the top and bottom to create balanced spacing. To make it stand out while remaining easy to read, we'll adjust the font size to 35 pixels. Next, let's style the paragraph P tag inside the card. Just like the H2, we'll set its position to absolute. We'll position it 20% from the top and 5% from the left to ensure a well-structured layout. To prevent the text from stretching too wide, we'll set a max width of 400 pixels. We'll also adjust the font size to 25 pixels and apply the given RGB color to match our design. Finally, we'll set a line height of 25 pixels for proper spacing between lines. Now let's focus on the Explore More section. We'll target the Explore-More class and set its position to absolute. Then we'll position it 10% from the left, 8% from the bottom, and 10% from the right, ensuring it's aligned properly within the card. To structure its elements, we'll set Display to Flex, align items to center, and use Justify Content space between to evenly distribute its content. For the anchor tag inside Explore More, we'll remove the default text decoration and set it to none. Then we'll change the color to light gray, increase the font size to 20 pixels, and make it bold for better visibility. To keep the text in one line and prevent unwanted wrapping, we'll set white space to now wrap, ensuring a clean and structured layout. Now, inside the HTML file, let's bring back the background image of our card. We previously commented it out, but now it's time to add it back. To ensure proper styling and functionality, we'll give it the class name features-back-img. Then, move to the CSS file, target this class, and set both height and width to 100 cent, making sure it fully covers the card when visible. Since we want this image to be hidden by default, we'll set its opacity to 0. To create an interactive hover effect, we'll add a CSS hover state that changes the opacity to 0.08 when the user hovers over the card. To ensure the transition looks smooth and professional, we'll add a CSS transition effect, creating a nice fade-in effect when the user interacts with the card. Now that our first feature card is fully styled and functional, let's move on to duplicating the cards to complete our features section. Inside the HTML file, simply copy the features-card div and paste it 5 more times. Since we've already set the correct size and positioning for each card, all we need to do is update the content, including the title, description, and images. For simplicity, I'll leave the last 2 cards identical to the first one, but feel free to customize them by changing their text, images, or layout to better suit your project. And with that, our features section is complete. Now that we have our features section in place, it's time to move on and build the chat app section, where we'll showcase our AI-powered chat application with a clean and modern layout. This section will introduce key features, emphasize ease of use, and include a call to action button to encourage user engagement. To get started, let's add a new section right below the existing features section. In our HTML file, we create a section element and give it the class name chatAppSection. This will serve as the container for everything inside this part of the website. Within this section, create a div and assign it the class name leftContainer. This div will house our heading, descriptions, and the main button, structuring our layout for clarity and easy navigation. The first element inside this left container is the title, which we'll define using an h1 tag. The text for this title will be AI Chat App for Seamless Collaboration, a bold and clear statement that immediately informs users about the purpose of our application. Below this heading, we introduce a paragraph, but before adding the text, we embed an image inside it. This image will be a checkmark icon, visually reinforcing each feature with a recognizable symbol. Using the img tag, we link the checkcircle.png image, and right next to it, we add the text, seamless integration, indicating that our AI chat app works effortlessly with other tools and platforms. Directly beneath this paragraph, we add a subheading, H2, which serves as a brief but powerful description. To reinforce the main features, we add 2 additional paragraph elements, structured just like the first one. Instead of rewriting the entire pheat tag, we simply copy and paste it twice. The first copied paragraph will have the text Smart Automation, showcasing how the app can streamline workflows and reduce repetitive tasks. The second one will say top-notch security, emphasizing the strong protection mechanisms in place to keep conversations and data safe. The final element we need inside this left container is a button. Instead of creating a brand new button, we can reuse the one from our website's header. Simply copy that button and paste it below the other elements inside our left container, then update the text inside it to say, "Try it now." Now that we've structured our chat app section, it's time to make it visually appealing and properly structured using CSS. So let's open our CSS file and start by targeting the chat app-section class. Since this section contains 2 main elements, the left container and the right container, we'll set its display property to flex. This allows the elements inside to be arranged side by side, creating a clean, balanced layout. To ensure even spacing between these 2 containers, we'll use justify content, space between, which distributes the available space efficiently. We also set the width to 95% and height to 100%, maintaining consistency with the previous sections of our website. Lastly, we apply the same border as our earlier sections to keep the design cohesive and structured. Next, let's move on to styling the left container. We'll target the left container class and set its display to flex, but this time we'll use flex direction, column so that the content inside stacks vertically. To position it properly on the page and give it some breathing room, we'll add a margin top of 10% and a margin left of 10%. Now, let's refine the appearance of the H1 heading inside the left container. We'll set its font size to 40px, making it bold and noticeable. To keep the text from stretching too wide, we'll apply a max width of 650px. And finally, we'll remove any unnecessary spacing by setting margin top to 0, keeping everything aligned neatly. Moving on to the paragraph elements, we'll set display to flex and align items to center, which ensures that the text is always positioned correctly next to the icons. We'll also adjust the font size to 20px to enhance readability. Now, let's target the image inside each paragraph. We'll set their height to 25px and add a margin right of 20px to create a clear separation between the image and the text. Next, let's refine the H2 heading, which serves as the description of our chat app. We'll set its font size to 17px. To keep the text structured and prevent it from stretching too wide, we'll apply a max width of 400px. We'll also adjust its color using the specified RGB value to maintain design consistency. To improve readability, we'll set line height to 25px, giving it a balanced spacing between lines. And finally, just like the H1, we'll remove any unnecessary spacing by setting margin top to 0. The last element inside our left container is the call to action button. Since this button plays a crucial role in guiding users to try the chat app, we want to make it prominent and well spaced. We'll target it in our CSS and first set its margin to 0, but we'll increase the margin top to 40px to create enough space between it and the previous elements. To ensure the button stands out, we'll adjust its size, setting its width to 130px and height to 40px. This makes the button more clickable and visually appealing. Now, let's continue building our chat app section by adding the right container. Inside the chat app container, just below the left container div, create a new div with the class name right container. Inside this div, add an H2 element with the following text: powerful tools for seamless collaboration. Below the H2, insert an image element and link it to the tools group image. That's all we need for the HTML file structure of this section. Now, let's move to the CSS file and start styling the right container to ensure it blends perfectly with the rest of the design. First, target the right container class and set its display to flex. Use a flex direction of column to stack the elements vertically and align everything to the center with align items center. Add a margin top of 10% to give it some space from the top, and a margin right of 5% to align it properly within the layout. Next, style the image inside the right container. Set its width to 70% so that it scales nicely within the section without being too large or too small. The final element to style is the H2 inside the right container. Set its max width to 400px to keep the text structured, adjust its font size to 30px for better visibility, and apply the specified RGB color to match the theme. Increase the line height to 35px to ensure proper spacing between lines for a clean, readable layout. And just like that, our chat apps section is now complete. But before moving on to the next section, let's make a quick adjustment. Instead of using a section for the right container, let's use a div instead. Now it's time to create the next section of our AI-powered landing page. Below the chat app section, create a new section with the class name generative section. Inside this section, start by adding an H1 with the text generative AI made for creators. Below the heading, create a P tag that will contain the following descriptive text to introduce the section. Next, create a div with the class name gridbox, which will serve as the container for our grid layout. Inside this container, we need to add 4 div elements with the class name gridcard. To make it easier to style each card individually, assign additional unique class names to each of them: grid1, grid 2, grid 3, and grid 4. This will allow us to target and customize them separately in our CSS. Now let's move on to the styling. In the CSS file, first, target the generative section class. Set its position to relative and its display to flex. Use a flex direction of column and align all items to the center. Set the width to 95% and apply the same border style as our previous sections. However, this time, remove the top and bottom borders by setting them to none. To create proper spacing, add a padding top of 10%. Next, style the H1 inside the generative section. Set its font size to Strass 40 px, align the text to center, change its color to white, and set the margin to 0 to maintain a clean structure. For the P tag, set the font size to 18px, apply the given RGB color, and align the text to center to ensure readability and balance within the section. Now let's design the grid layout. Target the grid box class and set its display to grid. Define a 2-column grid using grid template columns repeat to auto to make sure the layout adapts well to different screen sizes. Set the width to 95% and apply a max width of 2000 px to prevent it from stretching too much on larger screens. To space out the elements properly, add a margin top of 100 px and a gap of 30 px between each grid item. Now, let's style the grid cards inside the grid box. Target the grid card class and set its position to relative. Apply the same border style that we used for the main sections to maintain design consistency. Set its width to 100% and give it a height of 1100 px. Keep in mind that you can always adjust these values later to fine-tune the layout based on how it looks on different screen sizes. Finally, add a border radius of 30 px to create smooth, rounded edges for a modern look. For the first and fourth grid items, we want them to span across 2 columns to create a dynamic and visually engaging layout. Target grid 1 and grid 4 and set their grid column to span 2. Now that we have the structure in place, let's head back to the HTML file and start adding individual elements inside the first grid card to bring it to life. Inside the grid 1 container, start by creating an img element with the class name grid1-robot.img and link it to the service1.png file. This image will serve as the main visual for our first feature card. Below the image, create a div with the class name info, which will contain the text information for this card. Inside the info div, begin by adding an H2 element with the text smartest AI. This heading should be bold and eye-catching, grab the user's attention. Below the H2, create an H4 element and add the descriptive text that best explains this AI feature. Next, add a PP tag inside the info div, which will contain both a checkmark image and some descriptive text. Start by linking the checkmark image inside the P tag, followed by the text photo generating. Since we need multiple key points, simply copy this P tag and paste it twice more. Change the text for each new paragraph to reflect other AI capabilities, ensuring the layout remains clean and well-structured. Now, let's move on to styling this first card in CSS to make it look modern and professional. Start by targeting the robot image. Set its height to 140%, but feel free to adjust it to better fit the design. Position it as absolute and set both the top and bottom values to 0 to keep it centered vertically. Finally, apply a border radius of 30 px to match the smooth, modern style of the other sections. Next, target the info div to ensure the text is properly positioned inside the card. Set its position to absolute, adjust the right position to 7 cent, and set the top to 20 cent so that it aligns nicely with the card's layout. For the H2 inside the info div, increase the font size to 40px and set the font weight to bold to make it stand out. Now target the H4 element inside the info div and adjust its font size to 18px. Apply the given RGB color to maintain a consistent design. Set its max width to 400px and adjust the margin bottom to 50px. Align the text to center to create a structured look. Now, let's style the tag. Set its display to flex so the checkmark image and text align properly. Use align item center to keep everything vertically aligned. Set the color to white, increase the font size to 18px, and add a subtle border top to separate these text elements. Lastly, apply a padding top of 10px to add some spacing. For the image inside the paragraph, set its height to 40px to maintain a balanced proportion. Add a margin right of 20px to create some space between the icon and the text. Everything is coming together beautifully. Now let's move on to designing the second grid card to continue refining our generative AI section. Inside the Grid 2 container, start by adding an IMG element and linking it to the service2.png file. Next, create a div that will act as a message box. Inside this div, add an H2 element with the text simulating a user message in a chat-based AI photo editing tool. Below this div, create an H1 element with the title Photo Editing, which highlights the feature of this section. Lastly, add a paragraph to provide additional descriptive text about the tool's capabilities. With the HTML structure in place, let's move on to the CSS styling to ensure this card has a sleek and modern look. First, target the Grid 2 class and set its position to relative, allowing us to absolutely position elements inside it. Next, style the image inside Grid 2 by setting its height to 100% so it fully covers the card. Position it as absolute, align it to the right, and set its z-index to 9-1 to push it behind other elements, ensuring the text and other components remain clearly visible. For the H1 inside Grid 2, set its position to absolute, aligning it towards the bottom with a bottom position of 25% and a left position of 10%. Make the text bold by setting its font weight to 700 and increase the font size to 40px to make it visually prominent. Now style the paragraph inside Grid 2. Set its position to absolute, align it towards the bottom left with a bottom and left position of 10 cent, and give it a font size of 18px for readability. Add the given RGB color to maintain consistency with the overall theme. Set the max width to 400px and make the font bold to enhance its visibility. Next, let's design the div inside Grid 2, which will act as a chat message bubble. Set its height to 130px and width to 300px, and apply a background color of black to create contrast. Position it absolutely, setting the top position to 10% and the right position to 20 cent to place it near the upper right section of the card. To give it a rounded, modern look, add a border radius of 20px. To shape this div like a message bubble, we'll use the clip path property. For this, head over to bennettfeely.com, select the message shape option, copy the provided clip path code, and apply it to our div in CSS. This will create a realistic chat-style appearance, enhancing the interactive feel of the section. Now, target the H2 inside the message bubble and refine its layout. Set its width to 80% so it stays well contained within the bubble. Add a margin top of 20px and a margin right of 30px to position the text properly and keep it visually appealing. With that, the Grid 2 card is now complete, featuring a dynamic message bubble and a sleek, visually engaging design. Now, let's move on to designing the third grid card to continue enhancing our generative AI section. Head over to the HTML file and inside the Grid 3 div, create a new div with the class name info. This info div will act as a container for all the textual content inside this grid. Start by adding an H2 element inside the info div and set its text to video generation to highlight the feature we are presenting. Below the H2, create an H4 element with a descriptive text that explains this feature. Next, create another div with the class name info.icons. This info icons div will contain 4 smaller divs, each with a class name of icon. Inside each icon div, insert an icon from boxicons.com. These icons will visually represent key functionalities related to video generation. Actually, let's set 5 icons. We currently have 4, just add another one to make it 5. Finally, to complete the third grid card, let's add the Service 3 aim image right below the info div. This image will serve as the main visual element for this card, making it more engaging and dynamic. Now that the HTML structure is in place, let's move over to the CSS file and style this section. First, target the Grid 3 class and set its background color using the provided hexadecimal value to match the design theme, and set its position to relative. For the image inside Grid 3, set its width to 90%, position to absolute, bottom to 10px, and left to 5%. Next, style the info div inside Grid 3. Set its width to 90%, position it absolutely, align it 5% from the left, and adjust the margin top to make it 20% to give it a well-balanced layout. Now let's focus on the info icons div inside the info class. Set its display to flex, make its width 100%, and use justify content, space between to evenly distribute the icons. Add a gap of 5% between the icons and set a margin top of 8% to create some breathing space. Finally, enable Flex Wrap to ensure responsiveness on different screen sizes. Next, style the icon divs inside the info icons class. Apply a padding of 25px to maintain a consistent size. Set a background color using the provided hexadecimal value, and give them a border radius of 20px for a sleek modern look. Increase the font size to 40px size and set the text color to white to make sure the icons stand out. To add a unique touch, let's change the background color of the center icon. Target the third icon inside the info icons div, and instead of using a solid color, apply a linear gradient background using the background image property. This will create a smooth gradient effect, making the center icon visually distinct. With that, our third grid card is complete. Now let's move on to the fourth and final grid card in this section. Since the fourth card follows the same structure and elements as the first grid card, we can copy all the elements from Grid 1 and paste them inside Grid 4 to save time. The only modifications needed are change the image source in the IMG element, update the text inside the p tags to reflect different descriptions for this section. The last adjustment we need to make is modifying the size and position of the image inside the fourth card. But before that, we need to change the class name of the image from grid1 robot img to grid4 robot img. Target the grid4 robot img in CSS. Set its height to 100%. Position it absolutely and align it to the bottom and left. Finally, apply a border radius of 30px to match the styling of the other cards. And that wraps up this challenging and visually engaging section. Now that the generative AI section is fully complete, it's time to move forward and start building the pricing section, where we'll create a modern and well-structured pricing table to showcase different plans. Head over to the HTML file, and just below the generative AI section, create a new section with the class name pricing-section. Inside the pricing section, create a div with the class name pricing and box. This container div will hold two images that add a dynamic touch to our design. For the first image, link it to pricing parallax.png. To apply the same parallax effect we used in our hero section, give this image the class name parallax and add a data speed attribute set to 4th. Below the first image, add another img element and link it to magicalglob.png. This second image will add an abstract, futuristic look to the pricing section, enhancing the overall aesthetic. Now that we have the HTML structure in place, let's head over to the CSS file to properly position and style these images before moving on to the pricing plans. First, target the pricing section and set its width to 95% and height to 2000px to give it enough space for all the content. Apply the same border style we used in the previous sections, but this time set the top and bottom borders to none for a seamless transition. Set the display to flex, align items to the center, justify content to the center, and use flex direction column to stack the elements vertically. Finally, set overflow to hidden to prevent any unwanted scroll bars from appearing. Next, target the pricing on box. Set its position to relative, width to 85%, and height to 100% to ensure it takes up the right amount of space. Apply display flex and set both align items and justify content to center to properly position the images within this container. Now let's target both images inside the pricing on box. Set their position to absolute and align them 20% from the top to create an interesting layered effect. For the second image inside the pricing IMG box, adjust its height to 300px and add a margin top of 5%. With that, our background visuals are properly positioned and the parallax effect is working smoothly. Now let's move on to adding the actual pricing elements to complete this section. Start by creating a title for the section using an H1 element. This will serve as the main heading and should clearly indicate that this is the pricing section. Below the H1, create a div with the class name pricing-container. This container will hold all the pricing boxes, ensuring they stay neatly aligned. Inside the pricing container, create the first price box. Each price box consists of multiple elements, an H1 element as the title of the plan, an H2 element for a short descriptive text, an H3 element to display the actual price, and a button labeled Get Started to encourage users to take action. Below the button, add a paragraph element that contains a checkmark image, followed by a short description of a feature or benefit. To make this more informative, duplicate the paragraph twice and modify the text in each to display different features included in the plan. Now that the first price box is complete, we need two more to create a three-column layout for our pricing plans. Simply copy and paste the first price box two more times and update the content inside each box to reflect different pricing plans. Feel free to modify the text, pricing, or features as needed to add variety. One final adjustment to the HTML structure: give the H1 title at the top a class name of title so we can easily style it later. Now that our HTML is ready, let's move on to styling the pricing section with CSS to give it a clean and professional look. Let's style the elements step by step as follows. To create emphasis, we want the center price box to be slightly larger than the others. To achieve this, target the second price box in CSS and set its margin top to 20px and its height to 950px, making it stand out in the middle. Next, adjust the colors to make the section more engaging. Target the H1 element inside the second price box and change its color to purple to make it distinct. Then target the H1 inside the third price box and change its color to an orange shade to add more contrast and variety. With the pricing plans in place, the last element we need to add to the pricing section is a call to action link. Below the pricing container, insert an anchor tag with the text "See full details" to guide users who want more information about the pricing plans. Now, style this anchor tag in CSS by setting its color to white, its mic font size to 25px, and adding a margin top of 70px to create spacing between it and the pricing boxes. That's it for the pricing section. Great job. Now let's move on to the roadmap section, where we'll highlight the exciting features we're working on. This section will give users insight into upcoming updates and improvements. Start by creating a new section right below the pricing section and give it the class name roadmap-section. This will serve as the main container for our roadmap content. Inside this section, add an H1 element with the text "What we are working on" to introduce the section with a clear and engaging heading. Below the H1, create a div with the class name roadmap cards box. This container will hold all the roadmap cards, ensuring they stay structured and aligned properly. Now, let's create the first roadmap card by adding a div with the class name roadmap-card. Each roadmap card will represent a different feature in development. Inside this card, insert an image element and link it to roadmap1.png to visually represent the feature. Below the image, add an H2 element with the text voice recognition, making it clear what this feature is about. Then include a descriptive paragraph below the heading, briefly explaining the feature in a user-friendly way. Now that the first roadmap card is complete, duplicate it 3 times to create a total of 4 cards. Below the roadmap cards box, add a div with the class name our button box. Inside this div, create a button labeled our roadmap, serving as a call to action for users who want to explore more details. Finally, beneath the button box, create another div with the class name roadmap gradient to add a stylish gradient effect that enhances the overall design. Update each card's image, H2 heading, and paragraph text to reflect different upcoming features. This variation makes the section more informative and engaging. That's all the HTML structure we need for the roadmap section. Now let's bring our roadmap section to life with CSS styling, making it look modern, structured, and visually appealing. Start by targeting the roadmap section and setting its position to relative to ensure all child elements align properly. Set the display to flex and use a column direction so elements stack naturally. Align everything to the center using align items, center, and justify content center. Set the width to 95% and apply the same border style we used in the previous sections, but this time remove the top border to maintain design consistency. Next, style the H1 title inside this section to make it bold and prominent. Set the font size to 40px, a top margin of 200px to create spacing, and text align center to keep it well positioned. Now let's move on to styling the roadmap cards. First, target the roadmap card class and add a 0.5px solid border using an RGBA color to give it a subtle outline. Set its position to relative with a height of 1000px and a width of 45% to create a well-proportioned layout. Add a border radius of 50 px for smooth rounded edges and set overflow to hidden to ensure no content spills outside the card. For the image inside each roadmap card, set its position to absolute so it stays properly contained. Align it to the top, left, and right by setting those values to 0 and make its width 100% so it fills the card perfectly. Now, target the roadmap cards box, which holds all the roadmap cards. Set its width to 100% and display to flex to arrange the cards in a row. Align the items to the center and justify content to center for a well-balanced layout. Enable Flex Wrap to ensure the cards adjust responsively and set a gap of 30 px between them. To prevent excessive stretching on larger screens, set the max width to 1600 px. Don't hesitate to tweak element sizes to find the perfect visual balance. For the H2 inside each roadmap card, position it absolutely near the bottom at 20% with a left position of 8% and increase the font size to 35 px for clear readability. Next, style the paragraph inside each roadmap card. Set its position to absolute, aligning it 5% from the bottom and 8% from the left. Limit its max width to 80% to maintain a clean look and set its font size to 18 px. Apply the specified RGB color value to make the text visually appealing. To create a staggered effect, adjust the positioning of the second and third roadmap cards. Move the second card down by applying a margin top of 10%, and lift the third card up by setting its margin top to -10%. This subtle shift adds a dynamic feel to the layout. Now, focus on the button box inside the roadmap section. Set its width to 107 px and height to 60 px, adding a margin of 100 px for proper spacing. Then, style the button itself by setting its font size to 18 px and increasing its font weight to 700, making it bold and eye-catching. Finally, let's style the roadmap gradient to add a finishing touch. Set its position to absolute, making sure it appears at the top left corner of the roadmap section. Adjust its z-index to -1 so it remains behind all other elements. Apply a soft box shadow to create depth, and for a cool blending effect, use the Mix Blend Mode property set to lighten. And that wraps up our roadmap section. Up next, we'll dive into creating the footer section, so stay tuned, my friend. Just below the roadmap section, create a footer element. This footer will serve as the closing section of our website. Inside the footer, start by adding an H1 element that will display the website's name or any final message. Below this H1, create a div with the class name box icons. This will be the container for our social media icons. Inside this div will include 4 anchor tags, and each anchor tag will contain a social media icon that will source from boxicons.com. This will make our footer interactive and visually engaging. Now let's move to the CSS file and start styling. First, target the footer and set its display to flex to align its elements in a structured way. Align its items to the center and set justify content to space between so that the title and icons are positioned properly. Set its width to 95 cent, give it a height of 200 px, and apply the same border style we've been using for previous sections to maintain consistency. Finally, set its height to 200 px. Next, target the H1 inside the footer and set a left margin of 5 cent to push it slightly inward. Set the color to gray to give it a subtle yet stylish appearance. For the box icons class, apply a margin right of 5% to create proper spacing. Set its display to flex and add a gap of 20 px between the icons so they don't appear too close together. Now let's focus on styling the anchor tags inside the box icons class. Carefully apply the necessary styles to ensure the icons are properly sized, centered, and visually appealing. To enhance user interaction, we'll add a hover effect so that when users hover over any social media icon, a smooth box shadow effect is applied, making it stand out with a slight glow. Our website is already looking fantastic, but we can take it even further by adding smooth scroll animations to create an engaging user experience. For that, let's navigate to our CSS file and start implementing our first scroll animation to bring motion and life to our design. The first animation we'll create is called the auto display animation. This will allow elements to fade in and move into place as they scroll into view. To achieve this effect in CSS, we'll start by defining a class called auto display. Any element in our HTML that has this class will automatically execute the animation when it enters the viewport. Inside this class, we'll define an animation and name it auto display animation. To ensure that the animation is triggered as the element appears on screen, we'll use the animation timeline of view, which allows the effect to play smoothly as the user scrolls. Now let's define the keyframes for this animation. At the initial state, before the element becomes visible, we'll set filter blur 10 px to create a soft blur effect. Transform, translate it vertically by nagging it 200 pixels to position the element slightly below its original placement. Scale 0.5 to make it appear smaller. As the element scrolls into the center of the screen, these properties will gradually change to filter blur 0, removing the blur effect. Translate Y0, bringing the element to its natural position, and scale 1, returning it to its full size. This creates a smooth fade-in and slide-down effect, making elements appear naturally as users scroll through the page. Now that our animation is ready, we need to apply it to the elements we want to animate. Simply copy the auto display class, navigate to the HTML file, scroll up to the features section, and carefully add auto display to all the feature cards. This ensures that each feature card will smoothly animate as it comes into view. Next, let's create another animation for the chatApp section, giving it a unique entrance effect that enhances the user experience even further, making the elements dynamically fade and slide into place as the user scrolls. We'll start by creating the fade-in left animation, which will be used for the elements inside the left container. To define this animation in CSS, we'll create a class called fadeInLeft. Inside this class, we'll set up an animation named fadeInLeftAnimation using camel case for consistency. We'll also set the animation timeline to view, ensuring the animation plays smoothly as the user scrolls. Now let's define the animation using keyframes. At the initial state, when the element is at the top or bottom of the screen, we'll set opacity 0, making it completely invisible. Transform, translate x, minus 500px, shifting it 500 pixels to the left off screen. Scale, 0.2, making it appear much smaller. As the element enters the center of the screen, these properties will smoothly change to opacity 1, making it fully visible. Transform, translate x 0px, bringing it to its original position. Scale 1, restoring it to its full size. This creates a smooth fade-in and slide-in effect from the left, adding a polished touch to the user experience. Now that the animation is ready, copy the fade-in left class name, navigate to your HTML file, and carefully add it to all the elements inside the left container of the chatApp section. This will ensure that all left side elements smoothly animate as they come into view. Next, let's create a similar animation for the right container. Instead of starting from the left, we want these elements to fade in from the right side. The process is simple. Just copy the fade in left class, paste it below, and make a few changes. Rename the class to fade in right. Change the animation name to fade in right animation and update it in the keyframes as well. Modify the transform property. Change translate x minus 500px store to translate x of 500px so that the elements slide in from the right. Now, copy the fade in right class name and apply it to both elements inside the right container of the chat app section. Everything looks smooth and professional. With this, we've successfully added fade-in scroll animations for both the left and right sections of our chat app. Next, let's move on to creating the final scroll animation, bringing even more life to our web page. First, navigate to your CSS file and define this animation inside a new class called AutoBlur. Within this class, we'll set up an animation named AutoBlur Animation, which will run in a linear motion on both sides. To ensure it plays dynamically as the user scrolls, we'll once again use the animation timeline property set to view. Now, let's define the animation using keyframes. At the initial state, when the element is out of view, we'll apply a filter blur of 40px, making it highly blurred. As the element moves into the visible range between 30 to 70% of the viewport, the effect will gradually change. The filter blur will transition to 0, making the element sharp and clear. The opacity will return to 1, making it fully visible. As the element moves out of the visible range, the blur filter will increase to 40 pixels, and the opacity will gradually fade to 0. This creates a smooth and professional transition effect, enhancing the user experience by making elements feel like they fade into focus as you scroll. Now that our auto blur animation is ready, copy the auto blur class name and apply it to the elements where we want this effect to take place. First, navigate to your HTML file and inside the generative section, add this class to all grid cards so they animate as they come into view. Next, scroll down to the roadmap section and apply the auto blur class to all roadmap cards as well. This ensures that all cards in the roadmap section will smoothly fade into focus with the blur effect as the user scrolls. That completes all the scroll animation effects for this project, and the website is looking more dynamic than ever. Now we have just 2 more steps to finalize our project. 1, making the website fully responsive for all screen sizes. 2, implementing an animated sidebar for mobile devices. Let's keep going and bring this project to completion. Now let's focus on making our website fully responsive, ensuring it looks great on both tablet and mobile devices. We'll start by optimizing it for tablets. as most tablets have a screen width of less than 1200 pixels. To do this, we'll use CSS media queries to adjust the layout dynamically when the screen width falls below this threshold. Inside our CSS file, we'll define a media query targeting max width 1200px and apply styles to refine the design, ensuring elements are well spaced, properly aligned, and easy to navigate on tablet screens. Once the tablet responsiveness is complete, we'll move on to making the website look great on mobile devices. Since most smartphones have a screen width of less than 700 pixels, we'll create another media query targeting max width 700px. Here, we'll fine-tune elements by reducing their size, optimizing spacing, and ensuring everything remains fully readable and accessible on smaller screens. With these adjustments, our website is now fully responsive across all devices, providing a smooth and user-friendly experience no matter the screen size. Now, let's take it a step further by adding an animated sidebar for mobile devices. This will enhance navigation on smaller screens, making it sleek, interactive, and easy to access. Let's move on to that next. On mobile devices, we want a cleaner and more compact header. Instead of displaying the head right section, we'll replace it with a menu icon that triggers an animated sidebar for navigation. To start, navigate to the HTML file. Inside the header, create a div with the class name menu icon, and inside it, add a menu icon from boxicons.com. Next, just below the header, create a div with the class name Sidebar. This will be the actual sidebar menu that appears when the user clicks the menu icon. Inside this sidebar, the first element will be a close icon, which allows users to close the sidebar when clicked. Again, we'll use a close icon from Boxicons and place it inside a div with the class name close icon. Below the close icon, create an unordered list, ul_sar, and copy the same list items we used in the header's navigation. This ensures the sidebar contains all the main navigation links. For the next section inside the sidebar, we'll create a div with the class name social sidebar. Here, we'll reuse the same social media icons that we previously added in the footer section. Instead of adding them from scratch, simply copy and paste them inside this new social sidebar div. Finally, to complete the sidebar structure, add the button box that was originally inside the head right section of the header. This will ensure that the call to action button remains accessible even inside the mobile sidebar. With that, the HTML structure of our sidebar is complete. Now, let's move on to styling the sidebar inside the CSS file to make it fully functional and smoothly animated. Scroll up, and just above the tablet responsive code, we'll start by defining the styles for the menu icon to ensure it looks modern, interactive, and visually appealing. First, target the menu icon class and increase its font size to 35px to make it stand out clearly. Set its cursor to pointer, signaling that it's interactive. Define its position as relative, and set its width to 40px and height to 35px to give it a compact but noticeable shape. To ensure proper spacing from other elements, add a margin right of 10px. For the background animation effect, we want to maintain visual consistency with the button box animation used in the header. Instead of rewriting the same styles, scroll up to the button box styling. Locate the 4 lines of code responsible for the background animation. Copy them and paste them into the menu icon class. This keeps the design seamless and elegant. Finally, apply a border radius of 5px to give it smooth, rounded edges for a more polished look. Now let's refine the icon inside the menu icon. Set its position to absolute to have better control over its placement. Use the inset property to position it 2px from all sides, keeping it centered and well aligned. Ensure its display is set to flex, and apply align items and justify content set to center. Next, apply a background color using the specified hexadecimal value to create a sleek and modern appearance. To maintain consistency in the design, reuse the same clip path effect that we applied to the menu icon class, ensuring smooth integration with the UI. Lastly, add a border radius of 5px for rounded edges and set the font size of the icon to 30px size, making it clearly visible and well proportioned. Now, let's focus on styling our sidebar to ensure it looks clean and functions smoothly when opened. In our CSS file, we'll begin by targeting the sidebar. We'll set its positioning so that it aligns perfectly on the right side of the viewport. By fixing its top, right, and bottom edges at 0, we guarantee it spans the full height of the screen. For now, we'll set its width to 100% so that when open, it covers the entire mobile view. We assign it a background color using our specified RGB value and ensure it stays above other elements by giving it a high z-index of 1000. To arrange its content vertically, we use Flex Display with a column direction, and we align items to the start so they stack naturally from the left. Moving on to the individual elements inside the sidebar, we first style the close icon. This icon should be prominent, so we set its font size to 50px and choose a light gray color for visibility. We add a top margin of 20px and a left margin of 25px to give it proper spacing from the edges. Next, we turn our attention to the unordered list that holds our navigation links. We remove the default bullet styling by setting the list style to none and add a margin of 40px on the top and bottom to space out the items, while keeping the left and right margins at 0. The anchor tags within these list items are then styled to remove any text decoration, and we set their color to light gray with a font size of 30px and a bold weight of 900. To make the text pop, we add a subtle text shadow. For the social media icons, which are contained within the social sidebar, we set the container's width to 50% and display it as flex, using space between to distribute the icons evenly. We add a top margin of 60px and a left margin of 30px, and ensure that the text does not wrap by setting white space to now wrap. The anchor tags inside this social sidebar are styled similarly to those in the footer for consistency. With an additional right margin of 20px to create sufficient spacing between icons. Finally, we style the button box inside the sidebar. We set its dimensions to 150px wide and 50px tall, add a top margin of 10% for spacing, and position it with a left offset of 30px so that it aligns nicely within the layout. At this stage, our sidebar, when open, is fully styled and looks exactly as we want it. However, to keep the interface clean on load, the sidebar is initially hidden by setting its opacity to 0 and its width to 0%. Now we're ready to dive into creating the open sidebar animation. This animation will ensure that when the user clicks the menu icon, the sidebar will gracefully transition into view with a smooth, visually appealing effect. Scroll down below our current sidebar styling, and let's start building that open sidebar animation. Now, let's define the animation that will smoothly open our sidebar when the corresponding class is added to its class list. This will be handled through a combination of CSS and JavaScript. JavaScript will take care of adding the open sidebar class whenever the user clicks on the menu icon, while CSS will handle the animation itself. To create this animation, we define a new keyframes animation named Open Sidebar Animation, which will run and complete within 1 second. This animation will transition the sidebar from its initial hidden state to a fully visible one. Since the sidebar starts with a width of 0% and an opacity of 0, we want our animation to gradually change its width from 0% to 100% and increase its opacity from 0 to 1, creating a smooth and visually appealing transition. With the animation defined in CSS, it's time to integrate JavaScript to control when the sidebar opens. Navigate to your app.js file, where we will grab the necessary HTML elements and apply the logic. First, we select the sidebar by using document.querySelector and store it inside a constant variable named sidebar. Next, we do the same for the menu icon, storing it in a variable called menu button. Finally, we grab the close icon and store it in a variable named close button. Now, we need to add functionality so that every time the user clicks on the menu icon, the sidebar opens with our newly created animation. To achieve this, we add an event listener to the menu button that listens for a click event. When clicked, a function runs that simply adds the open sidebar class to the sidebar using the classList.add method. This small but crucial step ensures that our animation is triggered correctly. At this point, if we click on the menu icon, the sidebar should slide open with a smooth transition, creating an engaging user experience. It's important to double-check your code, as even a small typo in class names or method calls could prevent the functionality from working as expected. With the opening animation in place, the next step is to define the close sidebar animation, which will handle the smooth transition when the user clicks the close button. Now, let's move on to creating the close sidebar animation. Navigate back to your CSS file and define a new class named close sidebar. For this class, we'll set an animation called close sidebar animation, which will run smoothly within 1 second. The purpose of this animation is to transition the sidebar from its open state back to its original hidden position. Since the open state has a width of 100% and full opacity, the animation will gradually reduce the width back to 0% and fade the opacity down to 0. To make this functionality work, we need to handle it with JavaScript. Navigate to your app.js file and this time add an event listener to the close button. This event listener will detect when the user clicks on the close icon and trigger a function that simply adds the close sidebar class to the sidebar. At this point, clicking the menu icon opens the sidebar and clicking the close icon hides it. However, there is one issue. This action only works once. The reason is that every time we add the close sidebar class, it remains in the class list, preventing the open animation from running again. To fix this, we need to remove the close sidebar class before adding open sidebar when opening the menu. Likewise, before adding close sidebar, we need to remove open sidebar. This way, every time the user clicks the menu icon, the sidebar will open smoothly, and when they click the close icon, it will close properly, allowing the animation to work infinitely without any issues. Now that our sidebar is fully functional and looking great on mobile devices, there's one last detail to refine. The menu icon should only appear on smaller screens, as it is unnecessary on larger displays. To achieve this, we will initially set the display property of the menu icon to none, hiding it by default. Then, scroll down to the media query where we define the styles for mobile devices. Inside the media query, target the menu icon and set its display property to block. This ensures that the menu icon appears only on mobile screens while remaining hidden on larger ones. And that's it. We now have a fully functional and responsive sidebar that enhances the mobile experience of our website. Congratulations on completing this awesome project. If you ran into any issues along the way or found any part of my explanation unclear, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll be happy to help. I'll be back soon with another exciting project, so take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one.